The Dutchman isn't wearing any trousers. So after quite an adventure, getting from Beijing to deepest China, and a very long and arduous journey, I eventually arrived in a place called Ying County. I never managed to find it on a map. This is before the days of Google. I could probably look it up now, but as you probably may or may not know, I don't Google, not unless I really have to, and even then it's usually rubbish that it comes back with, even if it's accurate. So the way it worked in those days, it was a chicken factory that I was going to, literally in the middle of a paddy field in a very remote village. A huge, massive European-style chicken factory had been built. And about 2 miles from it, there was a very large apartment block had been built as well. I think it's quite common that the workers would be housed in an apartment block near to where they worked, and this was no exception. So I finally arrived in Ying County and arrived at the apartment block. It was the middle of the night, probably 3 or 4 a.m. and I knew it was to meet a Dutch engineer. It was a co-production, if you like, with a couple of Dutch engineers. They were essentially installing the refrigeration and the cooling systems, and they also turned their hand to doing the manual work, the manual labour that I detest. I detest it now and I detested it then. I'm much more of a typing on a keyboard kind of person, with as little effort as possible. So we arrived at the apartment block and knocked on the door. A woman answered. It was Miss Wu, and she was basically she's basically going to feed us. Actually, she's going to feed us all the time. I was there for just over 2 weeks. She would make all the meals. We had a fridge. The fridge was also provided by the company, the contract, and the clause was it was always to be filled with beer. Qingdao. It's a Chinese beer, and I'm glad to say it's now widely available. It's a very light, easy to drink beer, and I'm glad of that, because for at least 2 weeks I drank nothing else. So Miss Wu answered the door, and she was very gracious and very polite. She didn't speak English, but I resorted to the universal language of, sign language, to which I am actually not fluent at all. So basically, she brought us upstairs and knocked on the apartment door. And my younger colleague, not younger than me, younger than the older colleague, my Dutch colleague answered the door. And he was wearing no trousers. He was just wearing underpants. Now, being a man, I'm not ashamed to say it doesn't bother me. If it's the middle of the night, you sometimes see it. I suppose you see it on the beach. Men can sometimes wear very, shall we say, skimpy, small items of clothing. I'm not really upset by that. It doesn't do anything for me, and I certainly wouldn't be. I'm a very hard person to offend. However, Miss Wu was there, and the Dutchman was extremely apologetic that she should see him in this state of undress. Anyhow, he managed to find a robe. Miss Wu went back to bed. The driver and the interpreter went on their merry way, and I sat down for a Qingdao beer with my Dutch colleague. And it was nice. He explained to me that the apartment was a 3-bedroom apartment. That there was each bedroom had a toilet and a basin and a bath, so it was actually pretty comfortable. I got the worst room because I was only going to be there 2 weeks. He had a slightly better room because Well, he'd been there nearly 6 months. And then the older engineer who I was to meet the next day had been there a year. And during my tenure staying in this apartment, he was informed that he would be staying for another year. And I don't think I'm so glad to say I've never seen anybody since quite as depressed and unhappy. And he was so unhappy and so depressed, the company allowed him 3 days off to cope with the news. But he did get the best apartment, the biggest, most comfortable apartment. And I suppose he could always have quit, couldn't he, if he didn't want to do it. But he did it, and I left after 2 weeks. But the apartment was very interesting. The room I have a bit of a fear of creepy crawlers, mosquitoes, cockroaches, things of that nature. So before I departed for China, I came up with a plan that I would pack a very compact sleeping bag. This would be my protection, like a shield, a protective shield to protect me from the dangers that lurked in the dead of night in deepest China. So I unfurled, the first night, I unfurled my sleeping bag on the bed, and I had a quick look around the room, and I noticed next to the air conditioning unit there was a massive hole in the wall, and I could see the outside. And I did wonder what sort of creatures might find their way into the room. And it was quite warm. It was, I think, May, so it was quite a warm time of year. Not the hottest, of course, but still warm enough. And I have to be honest, I did have several mosquitoes find their way into the room. I was sort of half glad that I'd taken the now banned anti-malaria drug, but having had felt like I had something worse than malaria, maybe malaria would be better. And I also remember that my shoes at night I would not leave on the floor. I would put them on a table. And at night I'd get into bed and get into my sleeping bag and I'd zip it all the way up until the only bit showing was the minimum amount needed for me to breathe. And as I turned off the light, I could hear the noise on the floor. The cockroaches walking around, all around the floor.